So after watching the first episode of Echo, I kind of figured I should watch all the episodes one after another because this story just flowed so much better if you watch it all at once rather than one at a time. So I watched it all one night, typed out my notes, and here we are. We're going to be breaking down the entire series and then going over Maya's character arc, where she came from, her relationship with Kingpin, and how her character went from this villain to a hero, and how she's connected to her ancestors. And we're also going to throw in a little bit of references in there, some comic book stuff when we talk about her character from the comics and the storyline this semi-followed. We'll break down what happened at the very end of the series, setting up Daredevil Born Again. Now, the thing I really liked about the show is how episode 1 showed off Maya's backstory and where she came from and how this little girl has just had a life full of traumatic experiences, and it really shows because right away you have her having this really happy, fun moment with her cousin and spending time with her grandparents, and they all seem like a very close-knit family until it's a stormy day, she wants hot chocolate, and they go to get it, and it turns out someone cut the brakes to their truck, which ends up leading to Maya and her mother getting T-boned and Maya's mother dying, and then Maya also getting a giant shard of glass through her leg, which ended up being amputated, which I think was really interesting to show just the traumatic experience this young girl went through and how it changed her as a person, especially because while she's in the hospital, she blames herself for it. This little girl blames herself for what happened because she just wanted hot chocolate, even though in reality it's her dad's fault. Her dad was part of the criminal organizations and tied to Kingpin in the past. Someone was after him, cut their brakes, most likely trying to get him, but instead got his family. So I really like how they showed that very darkness to the story and how Maya has just gone through so much. And then on top of it, when they're driving off the property, see one of the woodpeckers, which by episode 5, we learned that the Choctaw people called it a biskinik. Have zero idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but it makes sense how we kept seeing it. And after the first episode, I definitely felt like that's what was happening here. I saw it, I'm like, that looks like a sign for something, because in the beginning of the episode, when we learned about the ancestors, it showed that bird with them. So I thought that was something cool because we learned later that this bird is like a sign of enemies nearby. But when we fast track forward after this traumatic event and them going to New York City and getting part of the tracksuit mafia, we get to see her growing up. We get to see her with Kingpin in the dojo, getting trained in the martial arts, and having the scenes we saw in Hawkeye as well, which is just a quick recap of what we saw in that series and giving us her past again just to show us how we got to the moment where she ends up meeting Daredevil when Kingpin sends her on a job to help take out their competition. And the fight scene with Daredevil was great, and I really liked how after the fight scene, when she went back to Kingpin, he gave her props for being able to go hand to hand with Daredevil, because not a lot of people have been able to do that. He can see her potential, and I really wish we did get more Daredevil in this series, only because I wanted to see him and Echo react. And I thought it would have just been really interesting to see him be a big part of the story to help push Echo into being a hero. However, in the end, her grandmother set her up for that journey, as well as her mother finalizing it from the spirit realm. However, I did think they were going to go back to New York at one point in time, and that's where the big final fight was going to happen with Kingpin. However, they kept it isolated in her hometown, and then made it so that by going back there and seeing her family is what put her on this path to being a hero. Because she kept avoiding them, she didn't want to face them, and when she was growing up a lot, none of them were reaching out. Her grandmother completely shut her off, so it was kind of like these two sides where she didn't want to see them because they didn't want to see her. Everyone that cared about her wanted to see her. They knew she was around, and they all missed her. And her grandmother was just devastated by the fact that she could see her daughter and her granddaughter, and it was really hard for her to move past that because it felt like she lost part of her when her daughter died. And I really like how they pushed that forward. However, the only thing that was kind of annoying was it felt like there weren't a lot of stakes in this series, because with Maya going to her hometown, you would think that at least one of the people she cares about would have died. I mean, she lost her mother, she lost her father. However, the way they set it up and being this R-rated series and just being dark in itself, you would have totally thought that Bonnie would have got critically injured, Biscuit might have died, and maybe Chula or Scully. Like, it felt like a family member close to her was going to get hurt, because they kept bringing up that you're bringing this war to this town, you're going to hurt the people you love. That never paid off. That was kind of my one thing that was really bothersome, is that it felt like to push this hero on the journey, something darker should have happened. However, I did like the way they tied her culture and everything to the series and with her heritage and ancestors. Because when we got the first episode with Chafa being the first of the Choctaws and having her have powers was really interesting. Having them come from like this dimension, being not fully human. And it was never fully explained what was really going on. And I feel like as we dive deeper into this character, we will learn. And it's a big change from the comics too, because Echo doesn't have these powers. However, we'll talk about that a little bit later after we talk about the episodes. But after Chafa, we got to see Loak, who is playing stickball, which is actually an early version of lacrosse and was created by Native Americans. And I thought that was really cool, and it showed off their skills and maneuverability, and I think that's what it was primarily showing, because then when we got to Tuck Low, they showed her becoming a lights horseman, the kind of police force of these people, and it showed that Tuck Low was a marksman, kind of going towards Echo's expert marksmanship from the comics. So instead of her getting it from her photographic reflexes and learning from watching, they got it from her ancestors, which I still think works, and the scenes with her in the roller rinks really showed that, because every time she was shooting and would get a perfect shot, they would show her ancestor. And I really liked how they continued to show how her ancestors were with them, just like how when she had her legs stuck in the train, you could see the glowing hands start. That's how she realized she has powers. I still don't fully understand how that works, because it felt like, did she get super strength, or was it her ancestors helping her push the thing away? There were bits and pieces that definitely needed a little bit more explaining, because they just left it open-ended. But as we continue with the ancestors, we eventually get to the episode that focused on Taloa, her mother, showing how her mother was a healer. But at first, with hearing that she's a healer, it sounds like she's someone who uses different healing practices to heal the people. However, she's literally a healer because the powers they have, they showed her healing a bird. Then with her mother and all her ancestors led to Maya being the next one in line, which I thought was really interesting. And they kept dropping the name Echo and how the ancestors are echoing within her. That's how she got her name in this. Again, is another change from the comics, but I think the changes they made in this really suit how they went around with this character. And as someone who is First Nations in Canada, it is really cool to see a character be based on Native Americans. Even though we're not exactly the same, I really like the idea of having different cultures have different superheroes, because it just gives more people representation, and it shows people that anyone can become a hero. And the thing is, with this series too, they teased from the very start how Maya is going to become the protector, and how her ancestors are always watching over them, and how it's their job to protect their families. And I really like how they set that up. As we got into the series, we got to the first real step in her journey when she ends up running into Bonnie, and then Bonnie getting captured while Vicky and them are keeping them hostage. Because this is her cousin, her sister, she was purposely avoiding because she didn't want to see her. After she wasn't talking to her for a long time, even though she still cared about her, she didn't want to face that. And after seeing her in danger and realizing she did bring this trouble to her town, I think that's when she slowly starts to realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And also when Henry finally turns around and agrees that he should have helped her this entire time and he was wrong at first. And I think also because of the fact that Kingpin came after him and Vicky was a traitor, that's what really turned him over the edge as well. So having her family work with her also made her realize that, you know, she doesn't have to do this all alone, and she can work with people to get stuff done properly. Also, rip Vicky while we're here. The dude was kind of dumb for thinking he'd just demand money from a mobster. That wasn't gonna end well for him. And it felt really hopeful for a second when Henry said he'd help her, until she went home and Kingpin is there, where the real big turn of events happened with the dark flashbacks. The fact that it started off with a scene where she wanted ice cream and the ice cream guy was being a dick to her because he wanted her to speak, but because she uses sign language, she couldn't communicate. And then Kingpin beats the living shit out of the dude. Like, he didn't kill him, but he did smash his face in a lot. Maya then came in and kicked him. Not even face. That's how you could tell this girl had gone through a lot and was a traumatized child, because after she watched Kingpin absolutely destroy this guy, she went in and had her part as well, which I think is why Kingpin felt connected to her, because instead of running away or being scared, she joined in. Because when he was a kid, he killed his own father with his hammer, and they showed that in this too, and meaning it's all connected to the Netflix series. And because all those series are now on the official MCU timeline, it means everything in those events are canon. It means everything that happened in Kingpin and everything that happened to Daredevil are canon. So I like what they did. And when we got the older Maya flashback where she was having dinner with Kingpin, he was telling her that the only people they can trust are each other, is because of that scene of her coming in and kicking the guy after Kingpin beat the crap out of him, showing that they're alike. They've been through a lot of dark moments and their trauma has shaped them. However, they're two completely different characters, as Kingpin has to chase that anger, has to chase that trauma that he went through, while Echo is in this journey of healing. She's trying to get past it and become this healer. Literally. You can also tell how bad of a freaking monster Kingpin is when he shoots the interpreter, because he's like, we can only trust each other, and the one that's been signing this entire time, he's like, you know too much, bang, you're dead. Typical Kingpin move, because he only trusts so many people. And the fact that Kingpin also didn't kill Maya right away, literally coming back to see her after she shot him in the face, really shows that he saw her as a daughter. He wanted to keep her in her life because it seemed like he felt like they could still trust each other, where she was just confused, she made a mistake, and that she didn't really mean it, because when she saw him standing there, she had a different look on her face. He saw it as she was glad he was still alive, where she was just shocked that he survived that. You could really tell how he was manipulating her and trying to get her back into his arms because he gave her that contact lens, trying to show her that he still cares, having a device that they don't need an interpreter for, and that he can talk and the sign language will come because of the device and she can see it herself. And the thing is, that's a really big Kingpin thing to do. Instead of doing the simple thing and learning how to do sign language, instead he made a device that he probably spent thousands of dollars on just to do this. Does he really care about Maya? Because if he did care, he would have put the effort in to learn sign language, and he didn't. I really like how they show that, because it's like the very subtle thing where Kingpin could have just learned how to do sign language, but instead he went about this huge roundabout way to make a contact lens so that he didn't have to do that. And I love how, with all the manipulating going on in this series and showing where Maya's coming from, they go to the casino, and that's when they show the hammer. Having Maya point out that Kingpin's been manipulating her this entire time and isolated her from her family. That's also why she didn't see them after her dad died. And you could see during that scene too, Kingpin was still trying to kind of control her and what she was thinking, because he's like, well, you know what you were a part of, even though she was a traumatized child being manipulated by this giant figure in her life that she saw as an uncle. So I thought that was really interesting how they set that up, because Kingpin is still manipulating her to this day. I feel like he still saw her as a daughter. He wanted to take care of her, unlike how his father took care of him. So it's just like really big things going on, trying to be more open with Maya, but in the completely wrong way. He really thought he had her on his side until she didn't show up to the freaking plane and he got all pissy. You know what? I'm gonna go kill your family. Because again, that's a typical Kingpin move. If you don't take him up on the second chance that he's giving you after you shot him in the face, he's gonna take away everything you care about. When Maya's leaving and trying to abandon everything, because even though she just got that huge talk and had all this stuff going on with Kingpin, she had to leave. But then she saw the Biscuit. Knowing her family was in danger and going back, having her mother's spirit reach out to her, show her that they're connected to all their ancestors, and her ancestors are with her, calling her Echo. They really like to set up the name Echo in this, with having the echoing and echo. So I thought that was really cool. And they gave us that call to action where she is the protector of her family and it's her turn to save them. And then they give her the suit, which honestly feels more of like a ceremony suit rather than one she would go around fighting crime in. And also with the way they set up her character in this, I don't know if she's going to be really running around fighting crime, but I could totally see her going back and fighting Kingpin's organization, especially with how they ended the series. And the thing is, Maya telling Kingpin how her family is part of her and how she's part of them is the worst move she could make, because by doing that, Kingpin knows exactly how to get to her, which is definitely, again, a typical Kingpin move. And then he finally admits to actually killing her father, which she already knew because of Hawkeye. And I thought after this part, we were gonna get epic scene of her kicking the shit out of all Kingpin's men and having this really cool fight scene, because we had a great one in episode 1, another cool scene in episode 2, and another one in episode 3. But then in episode 5, they just threw it out the window. I don't know what they did, but they completely threw out the fighting, and it made really no sense why there wasn't this big fight. But then Chula and Bonnie were able to use the powers, and I guess they are connected because of their ancestors, but I really didn't understand why they could do that. And again, there was a lot of no explanation about how the powers work, so I feel like that was a big thing that they needed to add in there, just have a little bit more detail so we kind of fully understood what was going on, especially when we get to the part where she sends Kingpin back into his mind and his childhood memory with his abusive father, showing him holding on to that pain, and him even saying he needs that pain and anger. He needs it to be who he is. But she's trying to get him to let go. Stop focusing on the anger. You could be a better person, because part of her truly cares about her uncle. It kind of shows what kind of person she is, even though she has done all these dark things because she's manipulated. And as she slowly become this healer, she's kind of realizing that she has to let go of her pain and she has to help Kingpin let go of his. And she ended up doing something to him that made him freak the hell out and run away, which I feel like that was her trying to heal him to get over his pain. So this could be something in the end that helps him push past his trauma and his abusive childhood, where in Daredevil Born Again, he's going to be still this bad guy. He's going to be going after the street level vigilantes, but instead of having that pain that pushed him before, he might have to find something new to keep his anger up, to keep that power he thinks he needs. Because he always kept the hammer to remind him of his traumatic experience as a child. But instead, he might need something new now because of how Echo changed his mind. There's definitely a lot of possibilities for this, and Kingpin continues to be amazing. Like, he has not skipped a beat ever since Daredevil, and I love how they've treated him in the MCU so far. Like, I know people were complaining about Hawkeye and how it's a little bit cartoonish. That's the comics. The dude is a giant guy who's super strong. He goes toe-to-toe with Spider-Man. Have you played the Spider-Man game? And I like how they're kind of doing his character, and I can't wait to see him in Daredevil Born Again, because I feel like it's going to be a new dynamic, and we're definitely going to be seeing new characters come coming in. But with that, speaking of Daredevil Born Again, let's talk about the post-credit scene. Because in the post-credit scene, we had Kingpin going to meet the remaining heads of the gangs of New York City. And then he sees on the news that it's time for a new mayor of New York City, and they need someone who's not a normal politician, someone who is a fighter, someone who's different, who knows how to get dirty, pushing Kingpin to be the mayor of New York City, which he does become in the comics, and he's gonna really truly own the cops this time. Because we saw in the past that the cops were scared of him, they allowed him to take Maya out of their custody and walk away, because he already had men in the inside. Now, with him running the city, making it look like he's clean, and he turned a new leaf, where in reality, he's been running everything behind the scenes and going after the street level heroes, trying to stop characters like Daredevil, Luke Cage, Spider-Man, and all these other characters who run around New York City on a daily basis from being heroes. And I'm really looking forward to this because it's going to be a cool dynamic with these characters. And I feel like with Daredevil Born Again, it's not going to be just Daredevil. I have a very big feeling that that show is going to be Kingpin, Daredevil, Echo, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist. I'm still hoping we get Spider-Man, but that's a high hope and it probably won't happen. But characters like that. We'll probably see the Punisher again as well. Having these street level heroes run around New York and having to deal with the mayor of New York City, Mayor Fisk. So I think it's going to be pretty cool what they do, and if it's done right, it could be phenomenal. And I really hope we get to see new street level characters as well, because Echo's most likely returning as well, and I hope she gets a new suit with a mask just to have her more of that kind of proper vigilante running around the city, trying to take down Kingpin's empire and helping Daredevil fight crime. I really, really hope there's going to be stuff like that in this series. I like how they set it up in this, but I also like how they set up Echo as a character in this, and there's just so much more to come from it. And with that, let's talk about where this story was based off one in the comics, where Maya Lopez goes and shoots Kingpin in the face after finding out that he lied to her, which is exactly what happened in the Hawkeye show. In the comics, Kingpin framed Daredevil for killing her father, and then she found out, went after Kingpin, shot him in the face, and instead of having one eye have an eye patch, he had two, kind of symbolizing him being blind, like Daredevil, his greatest enemy. But in the MCU, they changed it so that Hawkeye Ronin killed her father. Kingpin manipulated that as well because he told him where to go, and it made more sense for only one eye because this isn't the comic books. It would be kind of hard to explain how he survived getting shot and both eyes got messed up, but having one go on the side of his face and having that scar now shows how he survived it, because it most likely just kind of grazed his eye, maybe took out a chunk of skin, but it didn't go through his skull. Which, fun fact, in the comics, Echo was Ronin for a time, so having Ronin be the one to kill her father was a cool nod to that. And in the comics as well, Echo doesn't have superpowers, at least not in the traditional sense, except when she gets the Phoenix Force in more recent comics, but that's a whole nother thing. She has photographic reflexes, which makes her a master martial artist, marksman, and acrobat, because she watches videos of Daredevil, Bullseye, and other various fighters to learn how to do this, and that's how she becomes such a good fighter. Just like how Taskmaster's powers work, which I thought they were going to kind of tie that more into her ancestors, but they didn't really show him fighting him as much. Part of me really hopes they still keep that part of her story, because it would be really cool to have her be this really good fighter, and that's how she did it, like running around with Daredevil, learning how to do the acrobats from him, would be a very cool sequence of showing how good of a fighter she could be. And the one thing of the comics is her weaknesses are like being a normal human. And the fact that they kind of changed her to have superpowers in this is something I wasn't the biggest fan of. Like, I like the ancestor part ties, but her having actual superpowers is something I wish they didn't do, because not everyone needs to have superpowers. I like having the normal humans fight with these god level characters, and just by making these street level characters who normally wouldn't have superpowers get superpowers is kind of annoying. And I guess her photographic reflexes are powers, but they're not the same as like having super strength, flight, speed, stuff like that. But in the end, it's cool to see what they changed from the comics to the MCU, and I'm very interested to seeing what they do in the future with her character. And before we get into the end steps of this video, this was a Marvel project with not a lot of Marvel MCU Easter eggs in it, which, you know, we don't always need those, but it would have been nice to have some. We did reference to Madripoor in this, where we saw Madripoor in Falcon and the Winter Soldier when Bucky, Sam, and Zemo went to go see the Power Broker there. We saw Roxxon Gas, which is a reference to the Roxxon Company, which is an evil corporation in the Marvel Comics, where their CEO is a goddamn Minotaur. And those were really the only two Easter eggs that were kind of in the background or mentioned for the MCU. Otherwise, we have the actress who played Bonnie, Devery Jacobs, who plays Kahori in What If. So I thought that was cool. I didn't know that. And then I saw it. I'm like, oh shit, she's the same actress. And then we had the Fast and Furious ending to Echo, where Echo goes to see her family and they're having a barbecue. I do wish there was more references though. And please let me know if you saw any in the comments, because I would love to know if I just completely missed them. Overall, this series was interesting. It had its flaws where some of the scenes didn't really flow as well as they could have. The fact that they didn't really explain the powers well enough is also one of those little flaws. That was a mature rated show that didn't actually have that much mature rated stuff in it. There were some brutal things, but not as much as I thought there was going to be. It is a step in the right direction for the MCU to have more ground level brutal stuff like the Punisher. So I'm hoping we see that. I really like how they tied Maya's culture to her character and how they tied her ancestors to her, kind of giving her more of this uniqueness, being the fact that we have a Native American hero who's going to be in the MCU. However, if Marvel keeps doing these Marvel Spotlight series where we get a quick few episodes of a character just to give us more backstory, more context to where they came from, is a great way to introduce new characters, kind of like how they did their specials that they had with Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas or Werewolf by Night. It really helps introduce us to stuff. Now, we better not be waiting years to see Echo again, but it's great to actually finally see another one come back after being introduced to them and they just weren't left in the dust years ago. And the thing with the series is the fight scenes are really good, and it makes me really excited for Daredevil Born Again, where we are going to see more hand-to-hand street level combat. And Kingpin really definitely did carry this series. He was fantastic. I love seeing him in this. Overall, very unique series. Very interesting. Even with its flaws, I still enjoyed it. The only thing is that to really benefit the series is you had to watch all at once, because if you watched it week to week, it would be kind of rough. But let me know, what did you think of the Echo series and her journey through it? And do you think she'll be showing up in Daredevil Born Again? I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my Marvel content. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.